put your hand up, shout at me if you've got a question as we go. And there will be a few minutes at the end as well to have questions. And if you look at the screen, I'm going to take you through these three areas this morning. I'm going to take you through vision, a bit about why I think it's so important that every business, whether you're a two-man startup to a big global corporate, has got a vision and what it does for you. Then I'm going to take you through the importance of focusing down on really what's important, the next thing to do, because if everything's important and nothing's important, as we've heard before. And then finally, we'll do a little bit on a winning team, why it's important to have a winning team around you, some of the principles of having a winning team. These are big subjects, of course, and I could spend a whole morning, indeed probably a whole day doing these subjects, but we're going to jump in and out of a few things as we go and answer a few questions. So here's a quote from somebody you may not expect to see on a slide about leadership, from Arnold Schwarzenegger. If you don't have a vision, you just drift around. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, some of you may know him from his days of pumping iron and being Mr. Universe. But of course, he was born in Austria after the war, and he had a fairly middle-class upbringing, didn't speak any English, and he started bodybuilding and ended up as Mr. Universe, Mr. Europe, Mr. Universe 7 times, went to America, became governor of California twice, built a huge property empire, became the highest paid actor in adventure movies and action movies in the 70s and 80s, married into the Kennedys. So what an extraordinary life this man had. And whether you like him or hate him, he just had an incredible life. And he was absolutely driven to achieve things. And if you want a good holiday read, grab his book called My Unbelievable True Life Story. It really shows you a man driven to achieve what he wants to in his life from quite humble backgrounds. So I thought I'd start with perhaps a slightly odd quote there for you, but it's absolutely true. If you don't have a vision, you do just drift around. And I think two of the things I would say always uppermost for me in leaders is if you've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people on a leadership team, or indeed in a company, clarity and alignment are two of the most important words for you. Get aligned about everything, get very clear on everything, don't lead anything to assumptions, clarity and alignment. And if you have a vision and you can share exactly where you want to go, that will put you in a great position. Here's another man who had a big vision, John F. Kennedy. Can anyone tell me when he said this? What year was it he said this? Just shout it out if you know what year he said this.
1961?
Absolutely. He said it in 1961. I believe that the nation should commit itself before this decade about as landing a man on the moon and returning him safe to the earth. What a bold dream that was. Some people will call it a vision, a dream, a goal. It's important in your business you get the terminology right and everyone understands what it is you're calling things. So 1961, he said this, and of course, unless you're a conspiracy theorist, in 1969 they landed a man on the moon and returned him safely to the earth. The interesting thing about this, of course, is in 1961 they had no capability of putting a man on the moon. That did not exist. They got a huge amount of money from the American Congress, but NASA must have had kittens when he said this, because they had no capability of putting a man on the moon. People were just dying in orbit on test flights and so on. And this is the first thing I want to say about a vision, is a vision has got to be unreasonable for you. And I'm sure you're all very clear on that. If you could achieve your vision with the current capability and capacity you've got, then it's not really a vision. It's just what you can do today. And I think if you look at even things like climate change now, and are we going to solve them? As Bill Gates said, we're not going to solve them with the technology we have now. We're going to solve them with the technology we develop in the next few years. And this is the thing about your businesses. Put a vision, a big, bold vision out there, and then start the conversation with your top team about how we're going to do this. What would we have to do? How would we have to grow? What would we have to develop? Who would we have to partner? Etc., etc. And it gets real energy in the room about what you're trying to do. Here's a quote that really backs this up for me. This is from Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was the first democratically elected president of an African nation, a woman president of an African nation. And she served this presidency for 12 years. She had a stellar career before this in banking and philanthropy and charity and the UN. And she said, the size of your dreams must always exceed your current capacity to achieve them, which is what I'm saying about the Kennedy quote, really. You've got to sit there as a top team and say, what could we achieve? And as soon as people say, well, I don't think we could achieve that, say, well, hold your horses there. Let's just talk about that, because you really need to push the boundaries. And if you look at all the great leaders in the world today, they will be putting ideas out there, dreams out there, goals out there, that they're not quite sure how they're going to achieve them. But that's where the excitement comes from, and taking your business to where it can be. So don't let that interrupt your thinking. And I use this philosophy in all the goals I set for myself in my life, about what I'm going to achieve in my own business, what personal things I'm going to do in my health and well-being, dreams, and so on. I put stuff out there that I'm not sure how I'm going to do it or how I'm going to achieve it. And then I try and figure out what that's going to be for me. So that's the first thing about a dream, I would say. Let's make sure I'm on the right one. There we are. Right, so let's go on to a couple of visions here, which you'll know one of them, I'm sure. You may not know the vision, but you certainly know the brand, of course, Tesla. Anyone drive a Tesla on the call? No, not yet. They'll probably be ordered fairly soon, I'm sure. So you know about Tesla, Elon Musk. He's a guy who creates absolutely extraordinary dreams. One of the things he said several years ago was, I want to die on Mars, just not on impact. And I thought that was a typical of his humor. But you know, his dream of setting up a space colony on Mars before he dies, and I wouldn't put it past him to get there himself. And this is Tesla's vision, right? To create the most compelling car company of the 21st century by driving the world's transition to electric vehicles. Look how big he's thinking. It's not just a compelling car company, it's the world's most compelling car company, by driving the world's transition to electric vehicles. And it's the world's transition to electric vehicles, not Tesla, it's the world. As you probably know, they share technology. Team Sport is an SME that I've been working with for about 8-9 years now, run by a Vistage member. Ollie mentioned Vistage earlier. Vistage member, he came in when they had 5 tracks in the UK, and he wanted to take it to a much bigger business. They got investment backing. They're now in their second round of investment backing. Currently, they've got 35 tracks across the UK, and they're opening one in Germany and one in Holland very soon. So they've gone international. They're on target to get 50 tracks, and they've gone now from a go-karting, indoor go-karting company to a leisure brand. One of the conversations I had with Dom Gaynor, the CEO, for years when I was coaching him was, what can you do in these big sheds that is more than go-karting? When you get people into your tracks and you want them there for 3 hours, what can you do with them rather than just get money out of them for go-karting? And so he's come up with Laser Quest. He's got a new brand called Putt Club, which is indoor putting. So they've got escape rooms, which are VR enabled, a whole load of stuff that sits around that. And one of the things about a vision, and it's the same with a purpose, is make sure it gives you the scope to discuss other things at a top level in your business. When he had a vision that talked about being the #1 indoor go-karting company, the only conversation they had as a leadership team was about go-karting, about the kind of things we could do around go-karting nationally and perhaps internationally. As soon as you change it to a leading leisure brand, you open up your conversation to be much bigger. And now they're looking at all sorts of things they can do, constantly innovating, that would go with their brand as they expand internationally. The next thing I'd like to just touch on as a vision is, how do you create a vision? Now, you might have just sat there as a top team and written it down and said, yep, that's where we want to be. I subscribe to a guy called Cameron Herold. Now, some of you may have heard of him, some not. He's got a lot of stuff on YouTube. Cameron Herold wrote a book called Vivid Vision. And this helped me enormously with vision, and I use it with all my clients now. Cameron Herold is very simple. He said, a vision should be 3 years out and no longer and no shorter. But you shouldn't just say, I'm going to do this in 3 years. You should actually give it a date. So if you were doing it now, you'd say, in November 2024, this is what we will have achieved. Give it a really finite date. And then he said, in terms of a vivid vision, write down what your business is going to look like in November 2024 when you walk in the door. What turnover has it got? What products and services has it got? What EBITDA has it got? What partners has it got? What products and services, geographic entities, everything about it, the culture, the number of people, write it all down. And take 1 or 2 pages to write this down. Create a really vivid picture of what it's going to look like when you walk in the door in 3 years' time. And if you've got a top team of 1, 2, 3, 4 people, get them to write their version of what that vision would look like in 3 years' time as well. And then share those visions and spend 2-3 hours crunching them and putting them together. So you end up with one piece of paper that says, this is where we're going to be in 3 years' time when we come in. Goes back to those 2 words I said earlier, clarity and alignment. Now, your top team of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, are now looking at that and going, that's what we're going to be. And when you've got that, you can literally extract the essence out of that to get a vision statement, which is what we've got on the screen now. But it also, more than that, gives you gold dust to start creating your strategic priorities, your big rocks, your big goals about what you're going to do to get towards your vision. Because actually, by creating those 1 or 2 pages, you've already started to put together the plan, if you like, of where you're going. It's quite vivid. It's quite real. If you touch on a bit of neuroscience for a second, there's a thing in the back of your brain called the reticular activating system. And what that is, if you decide one day that you want to buy a red Tesla 3, and that's what you've decided, you've looked it up online and you've decided a red Tesla 3 is what you're going to buy. When you walk out the front door and go for a bike ride or a walk or in your own car, you will start noticing red Tesla 3s everywhere since you've decided you want to buy one. That's the reticular activating system, lodging that in the back of your brain, and subconsciously you see it everywhere. And that's the same thing that starts happening with a big goal, a big dream, a big vision. You start saying, I want to achieve this in 3 years' time. Your brain starts figuring out how to do it. You go to sleep, you start thinking about it. Your team start to think about how we're going to do it. So the journey has started. Very, very powerful thing, this. So that's the first thing I'd say. Think about this 3 years out, very vivid vision, extract the juice from it. You've got a vision statement, then start using it to create your goals, your plans for the next 3 years. So let's look at a bit about prioritizing. I said earlier about the importance, and I think, if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. And if you've got the right vision laid out before you, then it's quite easy to start thinking, what are we going to do to get there? And I've worked with many senior leadership teams where we start working on, right, what are my goals going to be maybe for the next 12 months? We spake a half day or a day, putting that all up on a sheet. And we go, those are the big goals. And I say, right, you've got too many, they're not strategic. There's too many tactical stuff on there. Let's get down those to the big things we're going to achieve. And every bit of research will tell you, and I completely agree with it, that if you've got more than 6 big priorities for the next year, that's too many in terms of strategic priorities. You want to have 6 or less, the big rocks you're going to aim for. So let's imagine here that you've got these 4. All right, these are very generic. You're going to launch a new product or service. You're going to implement new HR software in your business or a software system. You're maybe going to create a digital marketing strategy, and you're looking at acquiring a new business. Say those are your big things you're going to do for the next year. And let's just imagine you've got a team working for you around this. and you're starting to put these things together. You've created a year's plan. You've got objectives, goals, measures, targets. You've got it in some sort of Gantt chart or something over a year. You've got milestones you're going to create, and so on. When you've got even 4 like this on a page, the problem is they all look as important as each other. And I always say to people I'm working with, if you could only do one next year, what would you do? What would be the most important? And they say to me, Ian, they're all important. I can't choose one. I've got to do them all next year. And I say, all right, I get that. But if you got to the end of the year and you just had to have one done, out of all of them, this one had to be nailed, what would it be? And they say, all right, well, do you know what? I think we've got to have a digital marketing strategy. If you look at these 4, I think if we get that right, our business will follow, and then we'll be able to get the products out the door. People will understand them. We'll put the software in, which we need, but maybe that's not a really top one. But we're being pushed by our HR people, and we do need to look at a business. But so it's a digital marketing strategy. Yeah, that's the number 1. Okay. That's the number 1 at the top of the page. We've all established that. Again, going back to those words, clarity and alignment. We've all agreed that's where the focus should be. If we're going to have a toss-up with money, with resources, with capacity, we're going to put it in that. Oh, we all agreed? Yes, we are. Right, okay, that's your number 1. Right, so where's your number 2 now? Where's the second priority out of all this? And you go, okay, we've got 3 left. Well, I think we've got to launch that new product very, very on the back of that, because if we get that new product out, then we'll get traction with the customers we want. The marketing strategy is going to help us. So I think it's the product. Okay, great. Now we've got 1 and 2 on this list. We've got our digital marketing strategy up there, our product next. Where's the next one? Well, we probably do need to look at acquiring new business, because a big chunk of our business we don't have. We're in partnership. We're in discussions already. And so we agree that acquiring new business is something high up there, number 3, and HR software now becomes number 4. So we between us, and this is so important as a top team, we've got our 4 in priority order. But more important than that, we can go out to our business. If we've got 10, 20, 35 people in our business, they know where our priority lies too. They know what we're shooting for, first, second, and third. And we're very clear on it. Where you've got a bigger business, this is equally as important. And Patrick Lencioni, who's one of my favorite authors, talks about thematic goals in a business. And the thematic goal is saying that for a period of time, we're going to have a theme that's going to drive all our energy in our business towards this one thing. And in this case, if we started with digital marketing strategy, that would be our big theme. He also calls it a rallying cry. So that as the leaders in the team, you walk around and you say, this is what we're focused on for the next period of time.
Ian, there's a question from Yogesh.
I just saw that. Ian, who is we in deciding strategic priorities? What is the most effective way of deciding this? So Yogesh, just give me a bit more on that. Do you mean the leadership team? Is that what your question is about?
Yes, it's around there. So when we have this, if I look at this list, and let's keeping the scope of this discussion for this list that you've given or showed, now all of this are from a different functional, leadership that's coming to you. Now everybody will say, no, ours is a priority, right? Even if you say that we are stripped with resources, money, cash, whatever, but they're gonna just shout from the top of their roof saying that, no, this is we got to have fast. So that's what I meant, that when you say, no, we should decide, we means that this is more like a democratic way of deciding that what should be a strategic priority. And I think that when it depends on the company where they are in the journey, if they are a little bit less established, then you're going to have a conflicting inputs, and some vested interest as well, who is bringing those initiatives to you. And that's the second question, is that if that's the case, then you as a leader or founder, let's put it this way, of the company, what's the most efficient or effective way of deciding that, okay, which one to pick?
It's a great question. And it comes down to, I suppose, the next area we're going to go on to, but I won't duck your question. I'll answer it now, but it will be reinforced by the next area. The most important team in your business is your top team. And they have got to be very close, very able to have open, honest, vulnerable discussions, no personal digs, get to the root cause of things, get it on the table. And, I used to work for a Swedish company where they used to look for consensus. I don't believe in consensus. Consensus doesn't work. I believe everyone should have an input, and you should have a very open dialogue, very open discussion. And part of the job of the CEO, I think, is to, if they are absolutely convinced this is the right thing to do, to use energy, passion, and all the persuasive powers you've got to get other people on side with you. Because at the end of the day, it's the CEO, the founder, the person who's put their mortgage, the mortgage of their house, taken all the risk. They're the person who's got to make the final call on anything, obviously, in this sort of scenario. But you don't want people falling out with you and saying, well, I disagree completely. I think we should do something else. So it comes back to this relationship, this ability to persuade, to put your arguments on the table. And in every session I've been in, it is a bit of a bun fight. It's a bit of it doesn't come out easily sometimes when people say, I think the digital, in this example I use, digital marketing strategy is the right one. And then somebody says, that's just marketing stuff. We've got to launch the product straight away. And it's really not about the launch. So I say, okay, you want to launch digital marketing, convince us, all of us in the room, why that's so important. Tell us more about that. Why is it that needs to come before the product? And so that person would be put the spotlight on them. They've got to defend it. They've got to say what it's all about. Okay. Right, so are you convinced by that argument? Well, no, I still think it's the product. Okay, tell us why the product comes before the digital marketing. So this might take an hour to discuss, but it's an hour well spent. And at the end of the hour, you hope that the arguments have been put on the table, and at least everyone is much more understanding of how the business is working, because what you've got to have also, you've got to have people who are prepared on a top team to say, do you know what? I did think it was about the product first in the example I've given, but do you know what? I think we need to get the digital marketing strategy up there straight away, because if we don't, we won't get our customers understanding anything about our product. And you might end up in that sort of discussion. What I'm not saying in this, Yogesh, is that what I'm saying is, digital marketing, you might say, let's put that number one. Let's agree that number one. Number two, launch a new product. It doesn't mean you finish all your investment in digital marketing and then start your new product. What it means is you might have digital marketing starting now, and then we might put some resources and effort into that for the first 3-4 months, but we're also starting on the product. What we're saying to each other around the table is, when we're short of money, when we're looking at limited resources, we have already determined that we're going to get that digital marketing strategy launched. We've already had that discussion. So it's a complicated, bit of a spaghetti discussion, it's all intertwined. It's not easy, but I think spending the time involved in the discussion is very valuable. And it might even mean that you as the CEO, the founder, changes your mind, whatever order you had it in. But it's a key question, and thanks for raising it. And not an obvious answer either. These things are black and white, and that's why you raised it, right? It's not black and white. You just need to have the discussion.
Can I just add one more thing over there? Very short one. I know we will be pressed with time if I hog on to this. So when you look at this, then the senior leadership mix, you don't want too many, if I look at the personality traits or personality profiles, this DISC profile, for example. So you don't want too many dominant people over there, because what will happen when what you said, or explain to us why your digital marketing strategy should come first, and if that person is a D profile, that's it. Nobody has got would stand any chance, defending anything against this person. So
Yeah.
that's another follow-up interesting thing that you need to think carefully, not just looking at the capability of individuals when you're bringing them onto senior team, but more like a personality traits as well. You need to assess them almost all the time so that you have a good mixture. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, I agree entirely. And I think it's very important that a senior leadership team, I use DISC profiling. I used another version of DISC actually, developed by a guy called Merrick Rosenberg, called Taking Flight, who does the birds. And so a high D is an eagle. And what you don't want is a team full of eagles, because they'll just swoop into the room and they all want their own way. So I do think you want a mixture, and whether you're recruiting into a business, bringing people into a team, if you had a team full of high Ds, it's really hard to run a business like that. And I think that's what you're saying here. So I'd be very careful on that, and it's a very good point. That bell bin is something else I use, very useful to get different team profiles as well, creativity and team players and so on. Very useful. Couldn't agree more. Right, I better move on and see if we cover this thing. So again, I say, what's the most important strategic priority, which we've come across there? Let's move on. That's odd. What's happened here? Okay, right. My PDF seems to be dissolving at my end, but here we are. Here we have what I call a team excellence model. And if I mentioned a guy called Patrick Lencioni earlier, who is a guy I rate massively in terms of reading and writing stuff on leadership and teamwork, really. Some of the stuff he talks about is in here, and some of the stuff I've taken from other authors who I would follow. This to me is what you need to think about when bringing together a team at the top of your business, or teams within your business. And as I said earlier, if you get your top team right, your business will fly. Get your top team wrong, make it dysfunctional, too many eagles, it can be a real struggle for you. So, getting, as Jim Collins said, another great author, when you look around the table of your top team, be it 2 people, 3 people, 5 people, 6 people, you've got to look at them and say, are 90% of the people in the right seat doing the right thing? And have they all grown to be a better version of what they were a year ago? So growth mindset is everyone growing and improving around the table. Very, very important. Are you all on that journey to improve and become better versions of yourselves? And then, if coming back to this model, I'll take you through briefly, and please ask me questions if you have any. I think the first thing any team needs is a common, a joint purpose. Why is this team working as a team? Not the purpose of the business, that's something different. And you might want to write down the purpose of your business, not discussing it today, I think it's very important, but the purpose of the team. And I recently worked with a team in Leicestershire in England called FlexiServe, a manufacturing business, and came into the room and said that we had 11 people on the top team. This is a SME turning over about 25 million this year, and really growing fast. And I said to them, everyone write down the purpose of this top team, would you? And they all wrote down the purpose of this top team, why they existed, why they came together. And we got 11 different versions of purpose for this top team written on a piece of paper. Great. And the CEO was gobsmacked. He said, I can't believe we don't all believe we're here for the same thing. And we had a really good conversation as to why this team actually come together, what their purpose was. So it's a really good place to start. So a team need a common purpose. And what I've put around the edge there, as you can see, there's other things involved. They need a common vision of where you're going as a business. They need shared goals to align behind. Perhaps you call it a mission in your business. If you're in the special services, you might call it a motto, or in the fire service or the police or whatever else. So you might have various things that make you work and breathe and come together as a team. The second thing you've got to do and set right from the top is you've got to create psychological safety in that team where people feel belonging, loyalty, security. They feel open to state what's on their mind. And one of the things you've got to, as a leader, and this goes back to, Yogesh, what you were saying about different personalities, you're going to have introverts and extroverts in your team and in your business. And one of the things about introverts is, if you look technically, what does an introvert do? They process information in their head before they say it. Extroverts actually say and think at the same time. That's just the way it works. So if you're an extrovert, you speak and you think as you're speaking. If you're an introvert, you think about it first for a while. Now, if you as a leader are an extrovert and you're looking around the room and 3 people aren't saying anything when you're asking them for an opinion, they're probably processing the information. And you need to get in there and say, tell me what is on your mind. And I see so many leaders not doing that, not probing their people, not getting what they've got on their mind onto the table. And then you end up with this terrible situation where you have a meeting after a meeting, where people are having a meeting around the coffee place when they should have had it in the meeting before, but because they never said what was on their mind. But this is only going to happen when leaders create that safety in the room, the psychological safety. I'm not going to get shot down in flames. I'm not going to get stopped. I'm not going to be allowed to discuss what I think. And leaders have got to really set this up from the start and say, that's okay. You might disagree with me. I might disagree with you, but that's what we're here to do. We're here to discuss the knotty issues. And if we don't discuss it in the room, you're going to discuss it in the pub tonight or in the coffee bar down the road. And that's not good enough. We've got to have the discussion here. So you create that safety, and that safety leads to a trust. What Brené Brown, great author, TED talker, Netflix, podcaster talks about, she talks about vulnerability-based trust. And this is trust so that you can be vulnerable in front of your peers, in front of your leadership team, open enough to say that you've got it wrong sometimes, vulnerable enough to go and stand on a stage or make a pitch and show that you might not get it right. And this is all about openness, it's about emotional exposure, it's about risk, but it's about getting that trust in your team so they feel so trusting, they can challenge you, they can open up, they can admit their faults. Really important. 1, 2, and 3 only get us to 4, and 4 is where the magic happens. You will not have a great business, you will not have a great team unless you're prepared to challenge each other openly. Not personally, not personal digs, not shouting at each other, but challenging each other in a way that you talk about the most important thing that day. I always say to teams, sometimes get together, tear up the agenda, put the agenda in a bin, and say to each other, right, what's the most important thing we could discuss today? And just get a flip chart or a notepad and write it down. And get everyone's thoughts on what is the most important thing we should discuss today. Because that really should be your agenda. And so often we're sort of hijacked by the tactical things that we believe should be on our agenda. But it's a great question sometimes to just throw in and mix up your meetings by saying, what is the most important thing we should discuss together today as a team, as a business? And then get this real challenge there in the team. There's a guy called Shane Snow who he wrote a book called Dream Teams. And what he said is in your top team, you need to get a tension in your meetings, like an elastic band. Get the tension in the meeting, because if there's no tension in the meeting, then you're not discussing something that's important. But it's important that the tension doesn't get too much, that the elastic band snaps. And if it snaps, you've got personal in the meeting. So you've got to get the tension where people really want something to happen, some action to take place, some energy towards something you're doing. And you know you're discussing something so important to your business. That's the tension he's talking about, this challenge, this confrontation, this courage to talk about what's important. Now, if you get all those things happening, you get the purpose surrounding what you're doing, you get the safety to feel yourself, the trust to discuss things, the challenge and the really knotty things on the table, you'll then get people taking commitment and accountability. And that's a bit of a process as well, because then you get to the point where you're saying to people, we've discussed this big thing today. It's so important to us, right? Who's going to take this on and when are you going to complete it by? Leaders should be coaches at times, and turn it round the other way. So if I want if I want Graham to own this outcome from this particular discussion we've had, the way for me to do it is not to say, Graham, I want you to take this on, is to say, who wants to take this on? Because, and I think, you know, Graham looks like he might be the best in the team to take it on, but Graham, what do you think about that? And Graham says, no, you're right, I am best set in this team to take that on. I say, great, Graham, when are you going to do this first stage of this project? Ask him a question. Graham says, I'm going to get this done within a month, Ian. And I go, that's perfect, Graham, thank you. So does that mean you're going to come back to this top team, Graham, in a month and present where you are? Yes, I am. I'll do that, Ian, that's great. Now you've got commitment from Graham to do something that he owns. Too many times you see leaders saying, Graham, I want you to do this in a month and return it to the group within a month. Who owns that? I do, not Graham. So turn it round the other way with your top team. Get them to commit to doing something by a certain time, and you'll see a big difference in the way it works. And so you'll get that commitment, you'll get that accountability. And then the final thing in the middle, of course, is team outcomes. When a team has done all this and they get the commitment and accountability, the outcomes will come. But I think going back to something you alluded to earlier, Yogesh, is that you want a team there working as a basketball team, not an athletics team. Do you see the difference? An athletics team, everyone is there doing their own race. So if you're a 100-meter runner, that's all you can do. You can't affect the pole vaulter. But your teams have got to be basketball teams. Only 5 players on the pitch. One person has a bad day, you lose the game. You've all got to be there, knowing what everyone's got to do and working towards the outcome you want, not like an athletics team. And it's a very good analogy to talk about with your top team. Hey guys, what are we? How are we playing together? Are we playing an athletics team? Are we playing as a basketball team? And once you get them to understand the difference and go, no, we're playing a bit too much as an athletics team, what do we have to do to play more as a basketball team? Well, we have to support the thing we're doing. We have to have that clarity and alignment and that clarity of purpose, that real vision, that teamwork, that trust, that prioritization of the things we're going to do, and we're all back each other and we help each other with resources and we get the team outcomes. So that's a really quick run through a model. I normally take about 3 hours to get through with loads of examples, but I think it's really important to figure out how that can help you. And I hope I've given a few hints and tips along the way there. So what are we doing now? We've taken up, we're about on the time, Ollie. I think we've talked for about 35 minutes or so. So questions, I guess.
That was brilliant. Thank you very much, Ian. Any questions from that at all? Any questions you guys would like to ask Ian this morning? Or any clarity on anything? Gary?
Yeah, really good presentation. I think a lot of this, I'm not sure how it relates to startups and how does startups, because like Yogesh was talking about senior management team, he might only have 4 people in his whole team. So how do you build out that team from ground up? So do you start with the CEO and one other, and then do you start bringing people in? I think that would be a good message to get.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And, you know, I was listening to Jim Collins in San Diego a couple of years ago, and he looked at a group of SMEs in the room and he said, one thing you should never tell yourselves is that you can only create a business that goes so far and gets so big. He said, everybody I've worked with started once in a garage or in a bedroom, you know, and you can look back at all the examples of doing that, of course, you know, like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or any of these people, you know, they started with 1 or 2 people working out of a back bedroom, and look what they achieved. The interesting thing about starting is, yes, you start with an idea normally, and you start with something, maybe an idea from an old business or an idea from a friend, and you go, I could make this work. very rarely have I ever seen one person start a business and create it on their own with a bunch of people around them who are doers. You know, you need more than one brain at the top. You need more than one personality at the top. There's a great book by a guy called, what's his name? Gino Wickman, and it's called Rocket Fuel. And Rocket Fuel says in any business, you need two types of people. You need a visionary and you need an integrator. And the visionary is the person with all the creativity. The visionary is the person who says, we can be there in 3 years' time. The visionary thinks big. The visionary is usually a high D, and they fly in the room and they say, we can do this by tomorrow. Come on, let's go. And the integrator says, hang on a minute. We haven't got the funding yet. We haven't got the people to do it. We haven't got the software worked out. We haven't got a plan. And so you've got to have those two people working alongside each other to make it happen. One thinks about the future, one makes it happen. It's a bit like Peter Drucker used to say, leaders do the right things and managers do things right. And you've got to have a leader to know where we're going to go and what things to do, and a manager to do those things in the right way. And so, but then you need to build off that. You know, most companies I know have got two guys at the top who are brilliant, who are running it. And normally they are visionary, and normally one is an integrator. The danger is, I've seen companies work where they're both visionaries, and you've got no one doing the stuff, and it starts to go off-piste very quickly, because you know they're all trying to run at 100 miles an hour, and nothing's getting done, and there's chaos in their wake. And if you see that happening in your business when there's maybe only two of you, make sure you get the third person in. Is going to be, you know, maybe they're the accountant, maybe they're the person slowing you down. They understand the planning process. They want to get things done in a sequential order, because you've got to have those two sides to any business to go from scratch to 10, from 10 to 30, and from 30 to 100.
Thanks, Ian. Any more questions, gents, ladies?
Yeah, I got. Hey, it's Abby. I got one. Just before that, let me add on something to what Ian said. That's so true. In terms of startups and investors, I used to do due diligence for some VCs, and one of the factors, all the checkboxes and calculations for the investability used to be how many founders, who's in the core team. If it's one, then alarm bells ringing. So it should be at least more than one, a minimum of two. Yeah, I'm sure some of you know this, but yeah, it's a factor to consider. In fact, in some cases, we used to outright reject any conversations with one-man founder kind of startups. Anyway, so that's expanding on that. But I have a very simple question, Ian. Very simple. What is your vision?
What's my vision? Yeah, thank you.
I just it's great when you're talking about the visions. I just want to relate to someone like you having the simplest of vision. I don't know if it's simple or 10x moonshot, but what is your vision?
Yeah. So it's a great question, and I believe I work with lots of associates and things, but really it's me you're going to get. Sometimes when I get too busy, I bring in people who are going to coach alongside me or run programs alongside me, but pretty much it's me. So can one person have a vision? Absolutely. Can one person have a purpose? Absolutely. My purpose, and I'll start there, then tell you my vision. My purpose is inspiring leadership. So I want to inspire people to be better leaders, because if you understand leadership better, you'll run a better business. You've got more chance of getting there. So to me, when I speak to groups, when I coach people, when I work with management teams or leadership teams, I want to inspire them to really get energetic about leadership. It's an incredible thing. There's so much to learn. There's so much you can do. What's my vision at the moment? My vision is to inspire 1 million people. Where do I get 1 million from? Well, it's a nice round number. If I said 1,173,000, you'd probably say, well, that's a very strange number, Ian. But it's 1 million. Why? Because at the moment, I'm not sure how I'll get to 1 million, but there's lots of ideas of getting to 1 million. I've written a book, I do a podcast, I coach loads of people, I work with loads of management teams. I do a blog every month. Am I getting there? I've probably got a few 100,000 at the moment, and I'm working upwards. And it could go up very quickly, in which case I'll reset it, which comes back to a kind of interesting point. You know, how many times do you reset a vision? Well, as many times as you need to, I would say. If you're setting it too often, you're probably not being bold enough. It wouldn't stop me setting a vision that is so bold, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to get there. I worked with a guy the other day, and he had a 7 million target for a number of people he wanted to get to. And he's been doing this longer than I have, and he's got to several million at the moment. But for me, it's the number of people I work with and inspire. So it's
how
a
do you
simple
measure
one.
the million? Is it followers? How do you measure that vision?
Well, it's a combination of followers, people who've bought my book, people I work with, people who pick up my blog. And the more I look at it, you know, I'm looking at doing stuff online as well, doing some leadership programs online. I do an open leadership program every year. I'm considering flipping that to an online program as well. So it forces me all the time to think, am I really progressing towards this in the best way possible? Of course, it's impossible in a way, because I know somebody who's bought my book, who's then given it to somebody else. Well, I don't know. That's another person, you know. So I don't really know, and I can't really measure it perfectly, but it's big enough and bold enough to make me think I've got to do more. I've got to, you know. To me, it's the more people I get to, the better it is. The more I feel on purpose, the more I feel I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. There's a great poem written where the final line is, and I used it in my TEDx talk, is your playing small does not serve the world. That's the final line of the poem. Your playing small does not serve the world. And I've got that on above my bath in England, and I love that, because it challenges me every morning to say, how big am I playing? Am I playing big enough? Am I serving the world? If I believe I've got something to say, you believe you've got a great product to get out there, whatever it is you do, are you playing big enough to serve the world? And I think that's a great way of thinking. You know, am I doing enough? If I've got something good, let's get it out there. Let's inspire some people, and let's play big enough. So, yeah, it's a hard one to measure, but you know, it's big enough to make me think every day, am I doing enough?
Thanks.
I love that. That's brilliant. Any more questions?
I'll go on. You go, Graham. You go first.
Sure.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, great speech, Ian. And you asked a question about the speech by Kennedy. I don't know if anyone went to the Kennedy Space Center, and that is that as you enter it there, that's the sort of thing embodies there's a big picture of the moon and stuff. Anyway, yeah, and when you go around there, you get a real sense of the massive innovation that went into that decade. It was incredible, the sort of things that you don't even think about, like the fact that premature babies live today was off the back of them learning how the human body and oxygen operates and stuff. And it's amazing the innovation that they come up with. And the modern day car could run an engine the size of a shoebox if they applied the same technology as the rockets that got them to the moon and so forth. And even the sheer lack of stuff they had when you go into the control room that launched the Apollo missions, it's like really rudimentary computing technology, and yet they achieved all that. So my kind of question, I suppose, off the back of that poem you just mentioned there as well, is, you know, as the world at the moment faces massive problems and crises and so forth, you know, where do you feel that the leadership's going to come from? Where's the next moonshot that's going to bring us to solve some of these things? Because I feel the last 60 years we've probably got a bit lazy from that decade. We've sort of sat on our laurels and haven't really advanced a lot of those technologies to not create the problems first and foremost, and then secondly to now we do realize we've got problems, how we solve them. So that was my question.
Yeah, it's a great question, isn't it? I mean, I think it's very easy to get carried away with, you know, the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezoses and the Tony Hsiehs and the big guys that you kind of read about and you see in the press. But I think the interesting thing is I used to work with big corporates. So I used to do all my work with kind of Toyota and Lexus and Shell and HSBC and all these big companies. And I found it, and a lot in the NHS in Britain. And I found it now that I'm working with only SMEs. I found, looking back especially, and especially when I think about some of the rooms I was in, how most of them, most of the time, were very slow to move. They weren't very innovative. They blocked each other. They were very bureaucratic. They were very political. And if you paid me to go back a lot of money and work in a big corporate, I'd probably turn you down now. But because SMEs is where the speed, the energy, the excitement, the passion, and where they blow the doors off. It's entrepreneurs that make the difference. That you guys are the ones. And I feel so privileged to work with. Ollie mentioned Vistage groups earlier, which is, I run 2 groups of SME leaders, and to see those guys, and I've been with some of them for like 9 years, and seen them with, coming from, under $1 million turnover to 60 million turnover, and just watch their businesses grow and grow and grow. One guy now, he started in his bedroom, runs a company called Endreams, which makes VR games for VR headsets in Farnborough. And Patrick Olawana, who's the CEO there, literally, he came out of another company, started in his bedroom. They now got 120 people, and they've got investors just about huge, hundreds of millions in. And he's saying, I don't know whether to do that, Ian, or to build this company into, his vision is to build the best VR games company in the world. Now, how extraordinary is it to work with a guy who started in his bedroom 15 years ago? You know him well, and this isn't like Steve Jobs that I read about. This is Patrick, who I know really well, and he's talking about building the best VR games company in the world, and that would be worth billions. Now, and I know 4 years ago, Patrick was saying, I'm not sure if I've backed the right horse, in VR games. And so these, people like you are the ones who take the risks, who take the managed risks, who've got the energy and who have got nothing in their way because they don't surround themselves by too many people. And the trick is, of course, keeping agile, keeping entrepreneurial, and growing the business at the same time. That's the challenge. And sometimes too many systems, too many processes, too many of the wrong people can slow you down. But to me, the new innovations, the way that climate change is going to be solved, the way all the new innovations are going to come out, it's going to be through SMEs. Governments will follow where they'll see the pressure and they'll have to follow, but it's going to start with people like yourselves, which is why I only work with SMEs, because that's where the energy is.
I'm unfortunately the accountant who's the integrator, so I'm more to rein people back in again. So yeah.
Thanks, Ian. A question from Yogesh.
I wonder if we still have time. Maybe one quick one. Unless you're Elon Musk or that category people, your bold visions would scare a lot of people, including investor, what Abhi said as well, that he doesn't even wouldn't consider solo founders. In that regards, Elon Musk would never have found money, or investors. But so that is that element that the visions, or the, let's say, transformational visions, sometimes they scare people. But having said that, is the quality of team is quite important, which you also pointed out. That solo founder, I'm a solo founder, but I also recognize that, accepting your limits and limitation and making sure that you create a team around you, whether it's their co-founder or your strategic partners, or like the core team, is the right thing to go about. But this is where my question comes. How do you work with the likes of Elon Musk?
Well, that's a big question. How would you? Yeah, I mean, it's back. I guess it's back to that 6 degrees of separation, isn't it? Which people talk about. How far away are we from meeting somebody who would either inspire us, or we'd like to talk to them, or we'd like to get them on our journey with us. When you talk to the most inspiring people, you find out that no was never in their vocabulary. And I've heard so many people talk to me about how that they wanted to get in touch with, I don't know, not Elon Musk, but really serious players, and they just found their email. They found others who knew somebody who knew them. They just and they just did it. They got to them. And if you want to get on a podcast that is run by somebody you think, I could never get on that podcast, just get in touch with them. Just try and pick the phone up. Just, I think we automatically think we can't do something when it's somebody big and bold. And these people will talk to anyone, really, if you get them in a room, if you get the bit of their attention. So I've always been from that ilk that if you want to get in touch with somebody, don't automatically assume you can never do that. You can do that. Probably some people you may struggle with, but on the whole, go for it. I mean, I never thought I'd be interviewing some of the people on my podcast I'm interviewing now, or that I'd meet Jim Collins a couple of years ago in San Diego, or meet Simon Sinek. But I did because I wanted to, and I wanted to do the stuff I'm doing now. And I think, so never say never, and always try and figure out a way to do it, and just cut no out of your vocabulary, because it can be done.
That's very good, sage advice there. It's probably one of the reasons we persisted to get you on the show, Ian. Yeah.
Excellent.
So just checking that poem or ode you said earlier, is your playing small serving the world?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I think everyone should hang that in their bathroom as well. So
it's a poem by a lady called Marianne Williamson, which you'll find on the web, and it's called Our Deepest Fear. Well,
thank you very much, Ian. It's been wonderful this morning. Are you able to share the slides with us so we can distribute?
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
I'll send them to you, Ollie, as soon as we finish here today.
Thank you very much.
Please share them out.
Thanks, Ian. And we'll see you next time, guys.